Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here today. This class is all about texture and surfaces, I suppose. So here are the notes for today. We're actually going to be painting this doorknob and lock. So there's lots of beautiful rusty sort of effects in there. We've got a lot of wood and aged paint and cracks and crevices and all kinds of interesting shapes. So I think this one will be a lot of fun to do. I really enjoy doing textured things with pastels because they just do it so beautifully. Anything like bricks or rocks or bark on trees, that's rough and got some texture. It's just a lovely thing to paint with pastels. So let's get started. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to switch my camera over to my screen so that you can see what I'm painting, and I'll be talking all the way through. So bear with me while that starts to happen. There we go. So that is my desk that you can see there in front of you. And I've got a camera sitting above my desk on my iPad, actually, where I record or show you what's going on. So once again, here are today's notes. It's a doorknob and lock with texture. So if you've downloaded the video, you should have the notes with you as well. So that's this page of notes and also the images in both black and white and color to put up onto a separate screen. So I always find it much easier to look at if it's on a screen next to me. I have two screens on my computer desk, so I can do that easily, but you might have another iPad or even your phone. And if you have that, then you can zoom in and get nice and close and you can see all the detail. So see if you can put your picture on a separate screen or on your phone, and then you'll be able to get a nice close look at it. If you can't, then the notes will be enough information. And to be honest, I work from a print or notes most often. So this is our doorknob today. This is the credit here. So the person that supplied the photo is in France, and I think she was on Facebook. I think that's where I found the picture. But anyway, when you do share your paintings, if you've used a reference photo from somebody and you know who it is, it's always nice to give them some credit. So you could just credit the photo to Pamela Woodyard and thank her for the image, because I think it's a fabulous image. Lots of beautiful shadows, lots of lovely darks, a little bit of light, beautiful colors. So the first part of the class is all about doing our charcoal drawing, and that way we're going to draw up the shapes within the page using the grid image or grid system. And then we'll use charcoal to do the black and white version, and that's a lovely way to find the different tones. So by tone, I mean value. It's often called value. That's the lights to darks and everything in between. Okay, so let's get started. First up, just to have your notes nearby. So if you're looking at that as your reference picture, you've got it close by and you can see it easily. Second up, you need to have either an art diary like this one with all my sketches and things in it, or a piece of paper, just normal drawing paper will be fine, and some charcoal. So I've got a few pieces of charcoal here. It's my kneadable eraser, and they're all different sizes. So willow charcoal is the nicest one to do this kind of work with. And I like to buy little sets of those, which come in, I've got one there. I get the Montmartre brand. It's fairly cheap. You can get it in most stores, and they come in different widths, but they also have a bit of foil on the end to keep your fingers clean. So that's nice. So just a little set like that is good. All different widths. Check the widths on the packet. It'll tell you what's in there. And if you've got a nice range from fat to thin, then that's a really good option. So I've got a few different ones in here. These are all my working pieces. So first off, to draw up, I'm going to use a nice thin piece because that's easier to manage. And then when I start to shade and fill in different areas, I'll pick up a thicker piece that I can then lie down flat on my paper. So you might want to use a ruler, and if you do, then you can rule up a thumbnail of the page that we're going to be doing today. So that means just ruling something up that's around about the same size as your print that you can fit onto your page without filling the whole page in. You don't have to fill the whole page in at this stage. And then find your halfway points. So that's about my halfway point, and then draw grid lines on halfway. So I'll use inches. Just finding your halfway points, drawing your grid line on, and then your page is now ready to start doing your drawing. So I'll show you how that works. Just move this over to this side a little bit more. So I'm going to refer to the color picture on my notes first, because on this color picture, I've drawn the grid. So you can see on there that the picture's divided into 4 parts, isn't it? So we've got the top 2 and the bottom 2. So what I like to do to draw something up, rather than trying to draw up the entire thing, just break each section down into quarters. And that way, everything becomes a shape rather than a knob or a bit of wood or whatever it is that you're painting. So you're just looking for shapes then, and different lines all throughout that small section. If you've got a very detailed picture, you can divide that up into even more grid lines, so that you've got a lot more smaller pieces to sort of work in individually. And then when you get to the end, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You've kind of built all the bits and bobs and it becomes a whole picture. So we'll start in the top left-hand corner. If you want to cover up the rest of it, then by all means do that with a bit of paper or your hand. And we're going to look at where things intersect on the line. So I can see that the intersection on the line of the top of this knob is slightly higher than about halfway. So if that's about halfway, I'm going to say it's about there. So just mark a little point where that intersects. And then we're going to come down and find where it intersects at the bottom. So I'd say it's not very far above the halfway line, so about there. Okay. And then find the side of it. So how far in does this part of the knob come? And I'd say it's probably about a third of the way in, roughly. If you visually divide this page into parts, I'm going to say just under a third. So if my third's about there and there, then I'm going to say it's about there. So now we've got some points that we can kind of join the dots and get the size of this knob in its correct place. So you can just join the dots like this and draw part of a circle. Okay, and that's where our knob sits. Now, what else have we got in here? We've got this beautiful plate, this old plate that the knob's on top of. And then we've got the top of that now in this quarter, and it comes down, and it literally just comes down exactly under about where the edge of the knob sits. So we can draw a line down there like that, a nice straight line. Use a ruler if you want to. And then we can draw another line up to where. So you've got to figure out where that comes to at the top here. So it's about this far in at the top of that quarter and across. So if we do that shape like that, that gives us the shape of the plate in this little quarter. So that's nice. Make sure that's all lining up. Probably should use a ruler. I usually don't use rulers at this point because I like to keep my marks fairly loose, but there are a few pretty straight lines in this. So it's probably important to make sure we get them in the right spot. Kneadable eraser, if you haven't used one of those before, is really good for taking charcoal off and also for blending it and lifting it and lightening areas. If you might have put too much charcoal down and you want to lighten it, you can use these to lift it off and get your whites back in. So we'll probably work with that in a minute. Now, the inside of this plate behind the knob has a little ridge on it, doesn't it? And it comes in like this. It's almost like a picture frame. Comes down like that. So that's the kind of the ridge area. And then we've got a little nail or screw here. So we can mark that in there. And then the rest of this left-hand side of this quarter is kind of just all lines. I know in my print here that you can see all these horizontal stripes. That's my printer. It's not the picture. So I'm just going to try and ignore them and just start to draw down some lines like this, which is all the wood around the doorknob. And just drawing, there's quite a definite strong line down through there, and then another one down through here. And if you don't get it perfectly straight, I think that's okay, because this is so old, all the edges are a bit messy, so it's not very straight and precise in this section here. And then we've just got a lot of kind of textured marks that come down like that. There's a dark shape about here, which just seems to be part of the picture. Look, oh, it's actually a hole. It's a hole there in the wood. I had to zoom in and look at my picture on screen to see that. Harder to see in the print. So just putting in some marks through there, a few different shapes, keep it quite loose. And we just want to get some idea of texture. We'll come back and we'll look at tones and we'll darken and lighten once we've got the whole drawing done. Okay, so that's cool. I'm just going to blend that a little bit, soften it off. Cool, and you can do that with your fingers too. Get used to doing that, because if you're using pastels, there's lots of dirty fingers to be found. Okay, so that's about all the detail that we need to put in at this stage. Now we can move across into the right-hand quarter, and it's a continuation of all these shapes that we've already just started. So let's have a look at the knob again and see how far in the knob goes on this section. So you can even measure it. If you're not sure, you can grab your ruler and measure. So 5, that's halfway is that stripe, that line right there. So I'm going to put that in. So if I put my halfway line in, that's that line down there where the timbers meet. Oh, sorry, where the edge of the plate is. So I'm going up too high there. So that's a really good indicator. If you use your ruler, you can find out where things sit within that quarter. So see, it measures 5, approximately 5 across there. So 5, half of that's 2.5. So the edge of that plate sits exactly on that halfway mark, which is very handy. So I can pop that in over here, and then I can basically just join the lines up like this and bring that little edge down through there. It's not as obvious on this side because there's more light. So we've got dark on the left and light on the right in this picture. And then we've got another little screw sitting there. So we can't really see all of it, and this will be the fun part later. That sits there, which means that the knob comes in to about there, I'd say. So let's join the dots and continue that circle. So there's a bit more of it on this right-hand side than there is on the left. Okay, so that's our doorknob right there. Beautiful. Now we come across into the picture here. So we've drawn the plate, we've got all that in place. Come across to here and you can see there's another line running down there. And I'd say it's about halfway between this line and the edge of the page. So let's make a mark at about that far over and draw a line down there. Now that's timber. It's part of the wood around the door or of the door. And then this part here is all running in vertical lines. So that's the grain of the wood and the way that paint's been applied, and then it's starting to chip off. So we've got vertical lines on that side, but on the other side, it's all going horizontal, right? So that's a change in direction. So we need to make note of that and just notice where all those little marks are and where they sit across that way. Okay, so we've got, I'm not being precise here, I'm sorry, I should have measured each one. But if you're a measurer and a precise person, then you might want to do that and put each little mark or area in that you feel needs to be precise. These sorts of things I feel I can be a bit loose with and not too precise. So I can, just put some marks in, and kind of not have to do it exactly the same, as long as it makes sense when you're viewing it. And just notice the different lights and darks through there. So we've got some really dark little cracks and holes and different shapes. And then we've got lighter ones. So that's what's going to give us that beautiful texture throughout that side. Okay, coolio. The main thing we've got to make sure of is that we get this knob nice and round. So I'll fiddle with that a little bit till I get it looking like I need it to. That'll be fine. Now we'll move down into the bottom right-hand quarter. So it's really just continuing this line all the way down to the bottom. I'll use my ruler. So that's the plate behind the knob. And it finishes right on the edge here, doesn't it? And then we've got that little border around it again, like a picture frame. So you can continue that down. I know it's not as obvious on the right side because we've got light there, but it still needs to be put in. And a little screw. Okay. Or we can put that in like that. Just marking off those little corners so that we can see what that is. And then up here, we've got the edge of the knob plate. And then underneath it here, we've got the keyhole. So it doesn't look exactly centered under the handle, which is interesting. But we can pop that in here. So it sits at about there. Work out where it sits within that quarter. And it's basically just a straight line down with two round parts in it. How low does that come down to? About there. Let's say, let me measure. So this one is 7. So 3.5 is halfway. So yeah, it's higher than that, much higher than halfway. So that makes sense. Have it about there. That's the lock hole. Screws, we've got all those in. And then noticing the timber on the side here. So it kind of has different shapes. So right there on the halfway line here, we come across on a little angle like this, and then it goes in. So I don't know what's next to that. I can't tell you whether it's a window or what, but it doesn't matter. As long as we put those shapes in where they need to sit, then it'll all be fine. And again, we've got all these beautiful vertical lines that come down through there. If you want to put straight lines in, you can measure with a ruler and do that, or just do freehand. I like to do freehand because it just gets me into art mode and I feel a little bit relaxed about it all. Okay, and now we can move over onto the final quarter, bottom left. And again, we'll just continue the line of that plate behind the doorknob all the way down to there. We can continue our edge across from the other side and again down through here. So notice on the left side here, everything's much darker. So what's happening is the light's coming from the right and it's darker on the left side. So we've got to remember that when we do our colours and tones. Okay, so that's our doorknob in place and our plate, much darker down through there. And then we just literally continue on down with the other shapes that we started up the top there. So you can see how I think the grid method is a good way to go when you're trying to draw something up, just to get everything in the right place and in the right proportions. So that's our basic drawing. Now we can start to look at the tones because we've got everything where it needs to be. And we can now grab our black and white version, and you can see really clearly on there that it's very light on the right-hand side, on the lighter paint. We've still got a lot of dark, but that's giving us texture and edges and areas where the paint's been lifting off. And then on the left side, it's darker, again, because it's in shadow, and we've got lovely darks under that knob. So in some areas, you can't actually see the edge of the knob because of the dark underneath it. So let's refer to the black and white version of this. Grab a short, fat piece of charcoal Now, the reason I like short, fat ones is because if you have a long, fat one, it's too long to pull around on the paper. It's too much. So I like a shorter piece like that I can lie down flat, okay? Because when you lie it flat, you can get some really lovely marks, and they're not too precise because the flat sides are often wide or not. And I'm just going to rub it around like this, because what I want to do is darken off this whole side, all right? Because this is the lovely dark side of everything. So I'm just going to darken all the way down through there like that. Okay. And then if you want to, you can put your fingers in there and push it around a little bit just to push it into the paper, and then you can add more over the top. So use your finger to blend it in a little bit just to get that darker tone happening. It's like a mid-grey tone. And then we can now start to darken off all the other darkest areas. So looking at where all the creases and things are, and I'm using this short piece of charcoal. It's flat on the page, but when I want to do a line like this, I can tilt it up slightly and just lift one end off and use the other end to make your marks like this. And that way you get a nice thick mark, but it's not too sharp. I don't want anything too sharp in this picture. Everything's kind of a bit rough and rugged and old and worn out. So we need to make sure that we convey that with our marks. So just darkening off the top up here and putting those marks down, because obviously the timber on this side is running vertically. And so we're just going to start to mark in the edges that we can see, and then also kind of blocking in darker sections. So where that little hole is that we found before, make that as black as you can, because it's quite black. It's one of the blackest parts, isn't it? And there's a lot of other black in there, or dark. So then we can start to just really use your charcoal to run around and create some more darks. And if you need to lift some of it off because maybe you've put too much dark down and you need to lighten up a little bit, grab your kneadable eraser. Magical these are. And you can literally just shape it and lighten off like this. If you need to take something off, you can just pull it off like that. So that can be very helpful when you want to maybe get a bit of a light line or something, or a few splotches through there like that. The kneadable eraser is really good for that sort of thing with charcoal. So it's really great to have one if you've got one handy. Okay, and it's called kneadable because you've got to keep kneading it. It's like blue tack. You can sort of massage it. And what you're doing is you're pushing all that charcoal pigment into the eraser, and then you find a reasonably clean edge, and you can come back in and get a nice white edge. But see how it picks up the charcoal? So then you need to knead it again, push all that in to find another clean edge. So that's pretty much how that works. And then you can use it to get your lights back in. So kneadable erasers are fabulous for that. Okay, so I'm just going to keep blocking in darker areas, pressing harder where I want it to be darker and not so hard where I want it to be more grey than black. And I've just taken some of the white, or put some of the white back in here with my eraser. So now I can come around it and just really darken up those edges. So I'm still holding the charcoal on its side, but tilting it so that I'm getting the end of it is touching the paper. And it's still a nice wide sort of softer mark than it would be if I used the edge like that. Okay, so you can use it in all different ways. It's really good to be able to maneuver your charcoal around and use it in different ways. It really helps to give you the textures and the tones that you're looking for. Okay, so this stripy bit here looks to me like it is timber, but it's kind of got lots and lots of little tiny stripes through it and texture. So we're trying to sort of convey that feeling. It's all about, today's class is all about getting the feeling or the texture of the item with the medium. Okay, so just creating that woody look. I'm going to come across here now to the edge of the what do I call these? Wood sections, planks, or whatever they are, of the timber that's running down just beside the plate there. There's a lovely, really dark line running right down there. So see how I'm darkening that off, pushing nice and hard, because if I do that, then it should look like it's kind of curling a little bit, and it gets darker where the joints are. So where the timbers meet, we've got this lovely darkness, but then it sort of has a gradient from dark up to a slightly lighter as it comes up to the middle of that plank of wood or piece of wood. So I'm trying to create the feeling of the roundness of the timber and how it sinks down into the dark there. And then the one next to it does the same thing, but it's got a different texture. So maybe it's a different kind of timber, or it's just behaved differently with age. Who knows? I'm just dabbing with my finger now, so you can do dabs as well, and that still will lift off some of the charcoal, but try to keep some of the texture in there. So you can dab and you can rub and do all sorts of fun things. It's a lovely medium to play with. Okay, so my hole doesn't look quite as dark as I need it to, so you can come back in there and darken that off a lot more. There we go. So that's probably enough information for that side. Other than just taking a little bit of this off again to get a bit more of the light in there. Okay, it's a lot of detail in there. Then we'll move across to just coming up to above the plate there. That's quite dark, so I can continue that right across almost to the end on the other side. You can see there's a little light patch at the end there, so we'll keep that light. This bit's dark, and then we've got the edge of the plate, which is also dark, so it's darker than that piece of wood next to it. So this is quite black through here, so we want to darken this picture frame edge of the plate. Because it's got a bevel on it, it looks like it's a picture frame. So I'm just running my nice fat charcoal down the side of that. I'm pressing pretty hard so that it goes nice and dark for me. So what's that's doing is telling us that there's shadow on that side. Okay, so it's creating shadow. Remember the little lines in the corners there where the dark and the light meet? And then this bottom part has shadow to about there, and there's a little angle of it right down there at the bottom. So just make sure you pop that in. It goes across like that. Cool. Now grab your charcoal and just on its side, just softly blend the top part of that bevel, because it's not as dark as the left edge, but it is a little bit darker than none at all. What we're trying to do is keep this light side really light. So we need to look at the tones and make sure that we get, get them dark enough or not too dark, depending on what it is. Okay, so just darkening off up in there. And then we've got our little screw, but before we do that, I might just put a bit of a zhushy kind of thing down the side there. So the side of this is all rusted. Okay, so what I'm doing now is laying down my bit of charcoal on its side and just running it down that left-hand side of that plate, because I wanted to create the feeling of the darker side on the left and then the lighter side on the right. Okay, And under the handle here, under the doorknob is much darker, isn't it? So we can smudge that a bit more and make that a little bit darker than the rest, because that's where the edge of the handle is, but you can't actually see where they join because it's so black in there. It's really quite dark. So it's a dark area. It's casting shadow onto the plate behind the knob. So we've got a bit of just light sort of running your charcoal around. Give it a little wiggle here and there to get some different shapes in. There's some little spots and dots through there. You can put a few little dots in just lightly. We're trying to create the look of old. So see how that's all sort of looking like it's got some texture on it. And it's also in the greys, so it's still darker on that side. Okay, a few little dots up here. I still want to keep it light on the right side. So even though the coloured picture doesn't look that light, when you're looking at the black and white picture, you can see how light that is. And then I can come across slightly there. There's a slight shadow just under there, but not as dark as over here under the knob. And then we can highlight, just darken the edges of our little screws down here like that, so that they kind of pop forward. And I'm just going to give that bottom bevel a bit of a grey smush. Can't really see the bevel so well on the right hand side because it's all lit. So that line of the bevel is not as clear as on the left side. So I'm just going to smush that a little bit with my fingers. Lighten that off a tad. So it's already starting to look like it's got some shine on it. Now the knob itself is kind of dark around the edges, and then it's got the light on the top area. So let's just draw another circle very softly inside the outline of the circle, because that'll be the lighter area. Okay, so I'm just going to draw, just softly mark that in. It's not going to be a hard line in the end because we don't want it to look like that, but we just want to determine the difference between the edges. Now I'm going to darken off the edge where I can see it's really dark. So around here, and then as we come down to the bottom, the edge of the knob sort of disappears into the background because it's all the same tone. Okay, and then dark up through here. And then slightly lighter on the top right section. So what we're doing is creating this shadow effect, okay? And then I'm just going to lie my charcoal flat again and just run that around in this area here. What we want to do is make a gradual shade from dark up to not so dark in this part there. And by leaving some of the paper showing through, so trying not to blend it all in, we're starting to create that little bit of a shine that I can see on the doorknob in the top section just there. So what I'm doing is I'm running the charcoal over the paper, but I'm not pressing really hard. So when you don't press too hard, it means that it's sort of using the texture of the paper, if you've got some, to give you the feeling of the texture. Okay. So that's kind of not bad. It's getting a bit better. I just want to darken up under here now. So just checking your picture, always refer back to your reference photo, because that will tell you where the lights and the darks are. It's got all the information. I'm just going to lighten up slightly underneath this side here, just so it looks like it's poking out from the wood and not part of it. So we need to make it come forward and create the shadows and the lights to do that. Now, using my kneadable eraser, you can see in the picture it's a little bit lighter just under this section here. There's a soft shadow there, and then it gets really dark under there. Willow charcoal, because it is so soft, you can't get it really, really black. It won't go super black like you'd like it to. That's okay. This is just a practice run. By doing this in charcoal, we're getting a feel for the picture. We're understanding where everything is, and it's just going to give us, it's like a rehearsal to do the color version. I'm just going to darken up my keyhole because it's kind of got a bit lost in there, a bit smudged. Darkening that up. Nice. So that's now starting to look like it's got a bit of shadow and light. That's what we wanted. And we can move across the page now. So you can see this right-hand side of the plate is lighter. So we can leave that as is, I think, at this stage. And also that bit of wood on the right of the plate has well, obviously green paint, but on there it looks white. So we need to try and create that feeling as well. And it's got some runs that come down vertically, but it's uneven because it's all paint and it's cracked on the timber. So if we just run down like this with the edge of your charcoal, so I'm lying it flat on my page and I'm just running it down on its side like this and looking at where the darks are, okay? So down here on this bottom right section, we've got some darker marks under there. I'm in the far right bottom corner now. So darker marks through there. And then we come across into the lighter timber. So we want to try and keep that a little bit lighter. I'm just putting some of the broken bits of paint through there. So on the picture it's brown, but in here it's dark grey to make it look like it's got that lovely worn painted look. So see how by pulling the charcoal, the fat short bit vertically like this, it's creating a nice range of marks, and I can lift and smudge and do all sorts of fun things with it depending on how I'm holding it. Okay, so that's all sort of light on that side. I can lighten that up more if I need to. As we've got this little angled bit of wood here, and then under here is really dark. We've got a nice bit of shadow through that area. So you can darken off in there. Okay, so that gives us the feeling of a shadow underneath this piece, which is catching the light, so it's a bit lighter through that area there. Then coming up, see the edges of that wood that runs vertically down. It's bare wood, the paint's all come off, so I want to darken that section down through here. Again, I'm just using my bit of charcoal on its side. I'm tilting it when I don't want a long mark and just sort of tipping it and doing all sorts of fun things to get the feeling of that rough edge. Don't be afraid to press hard when you want to go nice and dark, because the dark makes the light shine. So always remember that. If you're looking to make something lighter, put more dark next to it or around it. Okay, so that's coming together. And now we can move over to this side where we've got these vertical planks of wood. I'm going to do the same kind of thing. I'm just using my charcoal on its side. I'm holding it now horizontal. I said vertical, I meant horizontal. And just doing the same kind of marks down through there. In the picture, it's actually a darker grey, that area, so we can darken it off a little bit more. And I'm just literally running that across horizontally to get the direction of the timber. So when you're doing something like this, always look at the direction that the thing is moving in or growing or sitting in, and see if you can pull your charcoal or pastel in that direction. There we go. So that's pretty much the black and white version. And then if you need to lighten anything up a bit more, you can come back in with your eraser and just take some of it off, tidy up some of those areas if you feel it, you've got too much charcoal on there. So this is a lovely little study. Would be a nice thing to keep doing in black and white, actually. I think it's rather a lovely picture. You can make up all sorts of stories about who lives there and what's been happening and how old it is and history and stuff. There we go. So I might leave that there and we might then move on to doing it in colour. So I'll show you what colours I've chosen for today's painting. I'll pop them on this page so that you can actually match them to what you want to do. So just looking at the picture, put the colour on there for a minute. They're the colours I've picked out. So what I've got is a really deep purple, very dark purple. I'm going to try to keep that as my dark. It might not be dark enough in the end. If not, I can always add black, but I don't want to start with black. I'll just start with the purple and see how that goes. So that's my darkest purple. Then I've got this other one that's not quite as dark. There's a lot of purple in here, especially on this left-hand side in the picture. There's lots of beautiful purples. So I thought I'd grab a couple of purples. So that's another purple. And then I've got another lighter one again. So I'll use those and I'll probably mix them around together to create these beautiful purples in here. Might even put some in the doorknob. So they're my purples. Then I've got a brown. This is a warm, reddy brown, which is what I can see in the doorknob and the timber. Okay, so it's quite a warm, reddish brown. And I grabbed this other one, which is a bit more orange. And I can see some of that in the wood in the picture there. So that's an orangey brown terracotta kind of colour. And then I went into the greens because there's some yummy greens in here. So I can see that green there? It looks a lot like this one. So I thought, oh, that's nice. Lovely and bright. Then I've got another bluey green that I will mix with that one to create some of the texture through that area there. I've got another lighter green because again, I can see this light green colour in the plate behind the doorknob and also in this timber either side of it. Okay, so it's kind of got some of that colour in it. It's got a bit of this one in it, and then I've got a really light green, very pale green for these really pale areas. So what you do when you're looking to paint something the same as what you see it, just get your picture and hover it over your pastels or vice versa, and you can kind of match the colours with your pastels. And if you don't have the right colours, you can mix them. So you can always get that darker green and a bit of white and mix them together. And then I've got some white as well, just to put a little bit of highlight on the doorknob and maybe somewhere else, but it's there for use at the end. If you've done my workshops before, you'll know that I like to save the light for last. And it's pretty much the same with darks, to be honest. So that's why I won't go straight to black at the beginning. I'll leave room to put it in if I need it later on. So I like to use the purples for the darks first and then see how I go. And it's the same with the lights. So I try not to go straight to white when I want to put lights in because you can't get whiter than white or lighter than white. So save your light for last. Use other colours like your pale greens and blues and things like that to get your lights in. And then you can add your final spark of white at the very end. All right. So what we'll do is take a little break and that'll give you time to gather your colours and get ready for the next round. This is the paper I'm going to use. So it's a browny burgundy colour. I can't remember what it's called. Might be burnt umber or something like that. But I thought that would work quite well with the colours that are in this. But we'll be filling the whole thing in, so don't be too stressed. I think I said in the notes, if you've got a bit of paper that you don't particularly like, then why not use that? Fill it all up and get rid of it, basically. So that's what we're going to do today. There's the colours. I'll leave that there for you to gather all your bits and pieces, and I'll be back very soon. See you then. All right, so let's get started on our next section. We can put away the sketch. We've already done a rehearsal, so now we know what the drawing looks like and how to set that all up. We've got our colours ready to go. Make sure you've got your notes or reference image nearby. And you'll need a piece of colour fix or pastel paper. Doesn't have to be colour fix, but something that's for pastels. If you try to use regular paper with pastels, it won't work because they need something with texture or grit to stick to the paper, basically. This is colour fix paper. It feels like really fine sandpaper. In fact, if you want to use sandpaper, you can do that too. All right, so let's get started. First off, you want to find yourself either some charcoal to draw this up with, which I might use actually, or if you've got a dark paper that charcoal won't be able to be seen on, you can use a light coloured pencil. This is a white charcoal pencil. So you can get charcoal in white, which is wonderful when you want to get the lights back in. And the other thing I had picked up was a pastel pencil, which is similar greens to what we'll be using today. So I thought I could either use that to draw my outlines and things, or I could use charcoal. I'll actually use the pencil because it might be easier for you to see it on screen. But charcoal is my preference because it's easier to remove and rub out and move around than pastel pencil. Pastel pencils are harder, and it does tend to stick to the paper and it's harder to take off if you want to remove it later. But we won't be doing that because we're filling the whole thing in. So find your halfway mark. 23 is 11.5 is my halfway line. So I'm just going to draw my marks in at my halfway line. Put a little mark on the outside too, just on the margin there, so that if you do lose your lines later on and you want to try and find out where something should be in relation to your marks, you've still got a little bit of an indicator on the edges there if you fill it all up. And then this side is 30, so halfway is 15. Okay, so do the same thing there. Just leave a little mark on your margin and then draw in your lines with your ruler so that you've got a nice grid now on your page. I hope you can see that. Maybe I should do it in white just so you can see it better on the screen. I might do that in white, sorry. Just let me go over that with white. Yes, that's much better. If I wasn't doing this for a video or on screen, I'd be using something not quite so light. Anyway, there we go. So now we've got our grid back in place, and you can again get your picture and work out where everything sits in relation to the grid mark. Okay, so that's why I put the grid on the reference picture so you can actually see that nice and clearly. I'll pop it over this side so that it's on the screen. You can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so we're going to work out where the knob sits in relation to our line. So it comes to about slightly halfway higher than halfway, about there on our grid line. And then it comes in at about here. And how deep does it go into this quarter? We're just looking at this top left quarter, probably about there, I'd say. So then we can loosely just join those lines together to create that beautiful round edge of our doorknob. Okay, and then remember we've got those other lines to put in. So we've got more doorknob on the other side. So this side has less of the doorknob and less of the panel behind it. So remember we said the edge of that panel comes down beside the knob. So we can draw a line with your ruler down to there like that. And that's the edge of our plate or panel behind our doorknob. Remember we've got the beveled edge, so I'm just going to put another little line down there like that for the bevel. And the top of the door of the plate comes to about there. So then I can just continue the little bevel and put that line in like that. Okay, so that's basically the harder lines that are in this side of the picture. And then we go across and we've got another line that comes down there. So that sits at around about the middle. So I'd say about there. That's another line between two pieces of timber. And then we've got maybe another line through here. It's kind of a bit messy in there, isn't it? Can't really see any edges. It's sort of blurry. So we'll just make that up as we go. And then we've got our beautiful big hole that sits about right on the edge, actually, nearly on the edge at about there. So you can make that any shape really, just as long as it looks like a hole in the wood. And marking in some of the grain through there. So that's mostly what we need to get in for that part. I've made my hole a bit too wide there. So I can take that off with my eraser. So if you get something in the wrong spot, just use your kneadable eraser to remove your lines. And remember to press lightly too. So try to press fairly lightly so that if you do have to rub it out, it'll come off nice and easily. All right, so now we can move across into this section and we can continue to build our shapes. So looking at the doorknob, I would say it comes across to about here. So I can now draw that in like that. I'll make sure I get a nice circular shape, even if you've got to go grab a cup or a glass or something like that to make sure you get a nice round shape there. It's fine to cheat. If cheating is what needs to happen, then it's fine. Now looking at the side of the plate on this side, it actually comes down around about the center of that part of the grid. So I'm going to draw a line down the center there, and then we can put in our beveled edge softly, softly. Okay. And then we've got a nice big wide timber piece here, which comes across like that. And remember, after that, we've got all these horizontal lines. I'll try and be good and put them in the right spot. One there, one down a bit. They've all got little cracks in them. That one comes to about there. Another one there. It's all natural wood, so we just want to try and keep our marks looking nice and natural. So that's the top part. Then we can continue down into the bottom right section. So still again, we've got to carry on with our plate, and it comes pretty much to the bottom of our page. We've got this cute little angle thing here, this bit of wood that comes across like that on an angle. And then there's a few up and down or vertical marks through there for our pieces of timber. Just mark those in lightly because they're not terribly defined and they're also quite dark. Okay, continuing our bevel edge down inside the plate here. Oh, I didn't put my little screws in before. Put those in. Put them in down the bottom here too. So I'm just going to carry on across here. My little screw there. What else is in this part? The lock hole. So it sits at about there, starts at about there. Just looking at where it sits in relation to the grid lines. How low is it going from the center line to the top of the keyhole? And then how far in from that other center line does it sit? So it sits about there. How long is it? It goes lower than this line. So I reckon about there-ish. And we can put the shapes of that in there. So that'll be a little dark shape that we put in later. Then we can move over into this bottom left quarter and finish everything off. So we can join the lines up basically and get everything in where it needs to be. Not quite straight. Put our screws in there in the corners. Continue the lines of the timber coming down through there. and they're all a bit rough and ready, but we can figure that out later. So basically, we've got our drawing in place. The main thing we need to have right is the shape of the doorknob and the plate behind it. Everything else can be a little bit wonky because it's so old and worn, and we get to sort of play around with that a little bit and have some beautiful textures and things happening. All right, so I'm going to take my own advice and see if I can find a glass or something that's round to make sure I get a nice rounded shape, to see if there's anything that'll actually fit that. So I'll be back in a sec. All righty, so what I found was a glass, and I think that's pretty perfect. So if you have something like that nearby, take advantage of it. Don't make life difficult, and make sure you get a nice circle. Lovely. And then I might just erase some of those other circles that I drew so that I don't get the wrong one. It's a little bit bigger, but at least we've got the basic shape in there, which is good. All right. So now we're going to grab some colours. Again, make sure you've got your reference photo nice and close by, easy to see, so that you can refer back to that and get some colours. You need to grab a little towel because I forgot to get that. So a little towel comes in very handy if you want to wipe your fingers. And I usually wet one end of it and keep the other end dry. So the wet end, you can sort of wipe your fingers nearly clean and then dry them off on the other end when you're, working between colours. All right, so there's my colours, there's my picture. Just move that across so you can see it properly. And we'll get started. So the first thing I want to do is block in some of the darks. So working with pastels, it's a really good idea to block in the dark colours first using your darkest pastel. So that's this beautiful dark purple. Blue violet is a lovely one too, but just something dark, not necessarily black. Like I said before, I like to save my black for later if I find I want to put black in. And now I'm just going to start to block in where I can see the darks. So even though the right side is light, we've got some darks down here between the crevices, haven't we, of the timber. So I'm going to block in a dark line down there. I'm going to put some darks into these horizontal lines as well. I'm just using the edge of the pastel to draw these lines in. Okay, so just slightly lines. When we start to push all the colour around, a lot of this will get covered up, but it'll still show through, and that's why we're putting this down first. You've got to get your layers down underneath first so that when you pop your colours on, you've got something to work with. So I'm just looking for the darkest areas, and to find those, often your black and white picture will be the most helpful because it shows you the blacks. So look for the dark black areas and just marking those in softly, softly. Okay, we're going to be nice and loose. We're really loose. It's good to start off nice and loose with pastels. Get your blocking in done. Don't get too caught up in the detail. The detail we can do later. So marking in all your dark areas. We've got this beautiful crease down the right-hand side there. Then on top of at the very top of the page, there's a dark area above the door plate. Obviously, our doorknob is quite dark, so I'm going to darken that off, especially around that bottom edge there. I'm using the pastel on its side, so try not to use the tips when you're doing large areas like this. You want to just use it on its side. And if it's a long piece, you might need to break it, but you'll get a much nicer result if you use it on its side. Okay, the keyhole's dark, so I'm going to fill that in there. Now, you don't have to be too precise at this point. You just want to get it down, get something on the paper. And then moving over onto the other side, we've got a fair bit of dark down there, which is quite exciting. So on that beveled edge of the plate, it's not completely black, but there's a fair bit of dark in there. So I'm just going to darken that down like that. Remember, we'll be blending and pushing it around, so it might not stay as dark as we started. And then we'll have to come back in and add more dark. So that's sort of what we'll be doing. We're going to be building up the darks as we go. So don't get too caught up in being precise at this point. We just want to make sure we get something on paper to work with. Okay, we've got that big dark hole over this side here, so we can darken that down. And then just through here, we've got some sort of random dark splotchy marks. I'm just, again, using the pastel on its side, keeping my mark quite loose and doing that kind of thing. Okay. So that's sort of what you want to be having down on your paper at this stage. A bit of a line down the side here too, just a soft one. It's not very dark down there, but it's a little bit, there's a shadow. Cool. So that's the darkest purple. Now we can begin to look at the other purples and greens and things in here. So we're still going to keep blocking in. What I want to do is get a bit of the purple, the next lightest purple, which is this one here, and put some of that down here on this left-hand side. Again, I'm lying it on its side. It looks quite dark, but it's definitely lighter than the one I just used. And I just want to pull that around like this. Again, we've got to get some stuff down on the paper so we can mix it up. All right, so the idea here is just to get something on the paper that we can then push around and make work for us. So I can see lots of beautiful purples through there. That's quite delicious. You can go over those dark bits if you want to. We can always come back and darken them down again. So don't stress too much about that. We're just keeping it nice and loose. Okay, so that's that purple. And then I'm going to add my lighter purple. So it's more of a kind of a lilac-y, pinky kind of color. And I can see a fair bit of that in there as well. I think these colors with the green would just be yummy. So zhooshing a bit of that around. Okay, this is all just background foundation stuff. We'll come over this a couple of times, so don't stress if it's feeling like it's a bit crazy. It takes a while to build it all up. Beautiful. I'm going to throw a bit of that on the doorknob as well, just for fun, around where that light part is. There's also some of this purple. Have a look around the picture. Just wander around it with your eyes and look for this purpley color, and you'll find it in a couple of spots. So it's up here on the top of the plate behind the door, whatever this thing is called. And there's a little bit down here in the screw. You kind of see it in different spots. Purples are really lovely for creating shadows. So don't be afraid to use a bit of purple. There we go. I can see a bit of it here too. Just in that timber, kind of light timber color. It's through there. Okay, so that we're blocking in. We're just blocking in nice and loose. Next, we're going to pick up some of the green yum yum. So this is that rich bluey green that runs down here, in my version of it anyway. And when you mix it with that beautiful dark purple that we put down first, it just gets these gorgeous colours. I'm just going to run that right down through there because it's quite yummy. Put a little bit of over in here. There's a couple of spots of it there through that section. And in here, so you can see there's blotches of this green paint that's maybe come off after years and years. And it's just sort of scattered around throughout this purple area. So just look for those green and blue parts and put those in where you see them. Okay, we're going to push all this around in a minute, and it's going to make beautiful muddy colours. and then we'll come back over it and brighten it up again with the same colours. So just pushing this through. Beautiful, lovely, lovely. Where else can I see this colour? Is it somewhere else that I need to put it while I've got it in my hand? There's a little bit up here at the top of the door, at the top of your page. There's a tad of it wandering around up there, sort of in the top of that section there too, and then that comes down into a different green. Now I'm feeling like I don't have, but anyway, I'll see what this one does. It's more blue, really. Should be in there. It should be in there. Over that one. Oh, nice. So see what happens? You sort of think, oh, I haven't got the right colour, but if you mix a couple of things together, it's amazing what happens. So I can continue that green down through there and then add a bit of this over it. It just highlights it a bit more. And there's more light there, isn't there? Yeah. Beautiful colour. Now, can I see this colour anywhere else? I can see a little bit over here and just slightly down through this side as well. I'm not sure that's the right green, but it'll do for now. I can always go and see if there's anything else in my selection over there. Put some of that down. I'm going to add the next lightest green over the top of it. And remember to pull the pastel in the direction of the thing that you're doing. So the horizontal area needs to be pulled horizontally and the other area needs to go vertically. Okay. I know it looks like a mess at the moment, but bear with me. Now this green is delicious and I think I can see that in the plate here. It's also too long. So to get it, I find something that long is too long. So I'm just going to break it. And then I've got a more manageable sized piece. And I can see that in this plate. It's a really nice, kind of a limey green colour really, but it's a bit washed out, isn't it? And we can wash it out with some of the other colours over the top. I'm not worrying too much about the lock hole at the moment. Just want to get some colour down on the paper. We know where everything is. We've drawn this twice. So it's good to have that little rehearsal because it really helps you work out where things need to sit. Okay, so up under here, there's a lot of shadow there, which we'll put in after. And down here, I'm just going to get the base colours in. You've almost got to look beyond the first layer in the picture and go behind everything to see what's got to go down first. Just going to put some of this green colour that I used in the plate over that bluey green that I put here before. So I think they look quite lovely together. Yeah, that's nice. Coolio. Now the lighter green, that's that lightest one I had, it can go in here. So can you see where it's lighter on this right-hand side of the plate? So putting that over the other green doesn't make it too bright, but it's just giving it that lovely feeling of lightness or washed out. It's more washed out than the other side because the sun's on this side, on the right, or the light, whatever that light is. So I just want to lighten that up a little bit with this lighter green. So that's my almost white, but not quite green. Lovely. Where else do I need to put a bit of that down in there, I think? It's kind of a lighter green paint there. Awesome. Now we've got, what colours have I got left? I've got this brown, which I picked up for the doorknob and some of the wood. So I'm going to put that on my doorknob. And you'll see as I put it over the dark, it makes a beautiful muddy kind of colour. It's already starting to come alive because the dark's underneath it. And then I've got some of that brown over here on the timber. So I'm going to zhoosh a bit of that in there. Browns and blues are yummy together because they're complementary, so they always work really well. A few browns down through here, in the paint. Just marking those in loosely. I know I've got a brown coloured paper and I could potentially use that and not fill it all up. So that's always an option with pastel paper. That's why you can get different colours, because you can leave the background undone or use the colour of the paper in your drawing. Groovy. Now, there's a bit of brown just over here. A little bit up in there. So kind of just touching it on in different spots where you can see a bit more of the browny tones. Lovely. And then I've got this lighter brown. So that's that orangey brown. So I'm going to zhoosh a bit of that over here and just do these horizontal kind of marks using the pastel on its side, just to try and create some of that woody look. Okay, so you can see that's already starting to work. So at this stage, you should be able to see, the lights and the darks and how this is going to start to come together. So we need a little bit of light and dark to show us. I'm going to put some of that lighter brown here at the top of the doorknob as well, because again, that's going to help to bring it to life and give it some energy. The zhoosh of brown through there. All these little rusty marks can have a bit of brown as well. And then around the knob there. Well, not the knob, what is it? The screws. Just mark those back in again. We'll have to darken up around them a bit. So that's basically our first layer. Kind of fun. And it's a nice way to kind of start your painting, because now you can look at that and think, all right, do I need any other colours? Do I like those colours? Can I change anything? Do I want to? All those things. This is a point where you're kind of testing the colours with each other to see what they look like and whether you're going to be happy with it. So if you're not happy with it, you can come back and change things. If you don't like that particular green, you can go over it with a different one, or, darken it with a bit of purple or whatever you need to do. So this is a time to assess your colours and to get a feel for what's happening in the picture. So what we'll do next is we'll start to blend all this in. The last thing we're going to do on this painting will be the doorknob. The reason for that is that it's poking out, it's coming forward towards us. Everything else is in behind it. So we want to do all the stuff that's in behind before you do the thing that's on the top. It's just easier with pastels than it is, to get around things. It's really hard to leave the background till last, because you've got to get in and around whatever's in front of it. So I know a lot of artists do that with different mediums like oils, etc. But with pastels, it's much easier to start at the back and work forward, or start at the top and work down if it's a landscape. So let's just push some of this in, because then we can start adding more colour over the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm pulling one finger and I'm literally just pulling the pastels around in the direction of the wood, right? So we're kind of dulling everything down and we're pulling everything around in the direction that it is. So this wood on this side of the panel is vertical. So I'm running my fingers in a vertical direction. What I'm also doing is leaving my finger on the page. So I'm not lifting it up. That way, all the colours are kind of merging in together without me doing this. If you keep doing that, you get uneven marks and you get fingerprints in everything, unless you want to. Sometimes it works for different things, but in this instance, I'm literally just pulling all the pastel into the page like that. So now it's all pushed in. It's lovely and soft. You can still see the lines and where all the different colours are. The whole I can push in like this, just softly, softly. We'll refine that later, so don't worry about the detail. I've got to keep putting my pastels back in their little container so that I can tip the dust off. Because I'm sitting at a desk, all the dust sits on the paper and it won't go away. If you're on an easel, which is the best way to go, it'll drop down and go into the tray at the bottom. But I've got to tip off the dust all the time so that we can keep working. Okay, so that's that part all pushed in. I'm just going to work my way across the page and do the same thing. So going into here, underneath my knob, sounds good, pushing that in, and then the panel area. So we've got a lot of that lighter kind of greeny colour in there. Probably didn't put quite enough pastel on. You'll know if you didn't put enough on because it sort of won't mix very well and you can see all the paper through it. And if you like that look, by all means, stick with it. The paper colour is a really useful thing to use in your pastels. So you can see there, some of my paper's still coming through, but it's giving me that nice effect of the old feeling. So I might just let that be and not add too much more. Although knowing me, I will probably come back and add more. Just wiping my fingers off in between darks and lights here because I don't want to get too much dark in on this right-hand side. And again, I'm just pulling that around in a vertical direction because that's what it looks like to me in the picture. It's a vertical thing. And again, just coming up to the top here, pushing that around. And just noticing the tones. So because we've put purples and darks on the left side, it's looking a lot darker than the right side. And that's what we want, isn't it? Okay. So that's that part pushed in. And I'm just going to go up the top here and push in some of this, the top edge that I needed to get to. That's gone. And that's gone. If you get some of your purples in with your greens or whatever, don't stress, it's okay. It all adds up to make a really lovely painting in the end. You can see this is already starting to look a bit old with all the beautiful shadows and things that we've created. Now I'm going to push in my doorknob. Now remember, we're going round with this one, so don't go up and down or sideways, just go round and keep your finger on the paper. So try not to lift it off, just keep running round and round and round. And it doesn't matter if you lose your lights and darks because we're going to come back and put them in again anyway. Okay, so don't worry if it all turns to mud. I'm going to come back and touch it all up. So that's the doorknob done and the plate behind it. And I really like how that's looking, the age of it. It's looking quite old and yummy. Then we'll move over to the right-hand side. So we've got a couple of different directions over here for the timber. So we've got this one panel that runs down here next to our door knob and plate. So that's a vertical direction. So pull your pastel in that direction. Okay. And then we've got, and then that continues here underneath this area. So running through there like that. And that lovely dark section down in here. That's a lovely, nice little shadow down through there. Pushing all of that in. We'll add more later, so don't worry. And then we're going to go horizontally on this part here. So this little section here, where we put our pale purple earlier, it's catching the light and it's a little bit lighter and old, but probably not as purple as that. But anyway, we'll come and tidy it up after. And then let's go horizontally here with your fingers, running across left to right, because that's the direction that the wood's going. So running across, keeping your finger on the paper, running across like that. If your edges get blurry, it doesn't matter. We can tidy it up later. So now we've got this nice blurry picture. Some people might like to leave it like that. That's fine too. But I'm a details person, so I can't do it. So now we can start to look at the detail and get into that. So we might start on the top left area again, and just, it's kind of blurred in that section, so we're just going to try and keep it a little bit blurry. I'm going to pick up my greeny aqua green color and just start to add a little bit more. So now that we've blended in, we're going to try not to blend too much after that, because we've got some pastel on the paper now to work with. We've got our first layer down, so that's the foundation layer. And then we can come over the top and just try not to blend as much, but use the pastels to create the texture. So press harder for smaller marks. You can see this section here has these shiny, sort of glowing, almost green section down through there underneath where the hole sits. And there's a few little bright areas there, and there's a couple of dark ones as well. So I'm just going to run down here with this green, and then I'll come back with my other green, and then I'll put some more dark around it to sink it back into the background a little bit. So the other green, that's this bluey green, put a bit of that in there too. Okay, so just looking at where it sits within the picture. We don't want too much because we don't want to make this the focus, but it's just going to show us where the light is and the age of the paint. A couple of little spots like that. Now there's some more up here too I missed, so put a couple up above the little hole. This is all very abstractish, this side, so you can kind of keep it quite loose without getting caught up in the detail because it's off to the back of the painting. Beautiful. So something like that. Now you might think that's a bit too bright, but I'm going to add a bit more of this lighter green just to sort of tie it all in with the rest of it. So when you use one colour somewhere, it's good to sort of put it elsewhere as well so that you've got it in a couple of spots. I'm just touching up some of those spots there. That's nice. And then I can get my not my darkest purple, my second darkest purple. You can see through here we've got some like stripes almost of timber that come down through there. So I'm just going to do some lines to suggest the timber shapes. Might not be able to see them very clearly depending on whether your purple is lighter or how much lighter it is than the darkest purple that we put down. I feel like I need a bit of grey or something in there to whiten it down a tad, maybe. Anyway, we'll see what happens. Maybe this will be enough. I feel like it won't be though. Let me go and get a grey just to get that woody look going on in there. Even a light blue might be nice. Let me see if that'll work. This is a light blue. So I just want to get the feeling of the timber running down. See if I can make it work this way. So lying it on its side and just wiping it gently to get that texture. You're working okay. Blue is a bit nicer than grey, I think. And then I can get my dark purple again and just darken up and some of those spots where you can see it's really dark. So to the left side of that blob of greens down there, it's quite dark. And then we've got some dark over here, coming all the way up to the hole, and then we can darken that off as well. So just noticing the different tones and the shapes, and putting some darks in where you can see it's nice and dark. Okay, that goes up to there like that. The hole has a little bit of dark above it as well, so it's an uneven shape, very uneven. And do some dark stripes down through there. So you don't have to do every single mark, but just suggest what's there. Now I'm going to tip off my dust again. There we go. So I don't mind what that looks like. That's going quite well. Then we can move over to this bright bluey green bit of wood. And at the top, it looks a bit worn. It's got some, it's almost like it's broken off, doesn't it? This outside section. So I'm just going to put some of that, this green color down here. Again, pulling it down like that will hopefully create some of those little ridges that are in this piece of wood. So I want to try and get the feeling of the texture of that. By pulling the pastel in the direction of the wood, it hopefully will do that for me. Okay, it's not too bad. And then I can lighten that up so you can see it's got sort of that aqua blue color in there as well. This one's a bit crummy. I'm just going to pull that down to over the green to try and get some of the lights in there. And I'm pulling it on its side, but I'm using the edge of it to create lines. So they're sort of softer lines. They're not as hard as if they would be if I was using the tip. They're also not very straight. Coming up to there. Something like that. And then I'll come back again with my darkest, because I just want to darken off the side of that as it goes in and joins onto the next piece next to it on the left. And just darken some of that off a little bit with my deep purple. And then up the top here is quite dark, isn't it, in that section there? So I just want to darken that off as well. You can see the red or brown of the wood coming through up here in this section. So I'll put a bit of that in there too, just to make it look natural. Natural wood. There's a little bit of it around the hole here too. So just looking, whenever I pick up a colour, I just kind of look at the picture and think, where else can I put this before I put it down? So always looking around the picture at the different colours and where you can place them, particularly with dust. Okay, it's also quite dark in there. So don't be afraid of the dark, because that's what makes the lights pop. We've got to really put the darks where they need to be so that all our lights can really sing. Okay, and then we've got that beautiful dark seam down here between these two. So I'm just going to darken that off a bit more. When you blend things in, they lose their strength. So you've got to come back over with darks if you really want to make things stronger. And then I can just softly push that down with my finger. I'm going to pull it across into this one a little bit, just so it gets that nice rounded feeling that we talked about when we did it in charcoal. So to do this, I'm using the pad of my finger and I'm just starting at the edge of the line and pulling it softly across like that. Little feathery marks. You can see how that's looking more rounded. Then wipe your finger off and just pull it again in a vertical direction. And it should just sort of blend in nicely and create that rounded feeling, or the sinking feeling of the wood. And then to make that even more obvious, we need to lighten up this side of that piece. So I'm just going to draw a line down there like that, and then pull this across like that, and then I'll use my finger to lighten that up, because it's quite bright, that beautiful bit of greeny blue wood in there, paint. It's got some lovely colours through there. And these are the colours that will attract the eye because they're complementary to the brown. Dust. So that's starting to look nice and bright on the right side. I'm just going to softly blend that in a little bit. Very gently pulling my finger down through there. Okay, put a bit more of this on. You kind of just fiddle around with your colours, keep layering. If you find you can't get any more on, it means that you've put, lots and lots on and your paper's full. And that's when you can use fixative. You can buy fixative in the art shops, and it's for charcoal and drawings. And what that does is, if you spray it over your pastel painting, it'll darken all the colours a little bit, but it'll set them as well. So then you can add more over the top once it's dry. It doesn't take too long to dry, about 5 minutes or so. So it's a good way to build your layers up. If you're finding you can't get more layers on and the paper's full, get yourself some fixative and put that over the top. I'll try a bit of this in here. I want to brighten this up a bit more even. This is the lighter green. That's that limey green that I'm using on the plate behind the doorknob. But I just want to zhoosh some of that into here to create a nice bright section in the wood. So that is a yummy colour, that one. And then I'm going to pull it across again with the pad of my finger. So if you start at the edge and then just go gently across, soft little feathery marks like that. What that does is it blends the colour into the other colours below it. And if you pull it from the edge, then it gives it that nice edge. Well, it's supposed to. Just go down vertically. Vertically. I'm just pulling that around to soften off the edges a bit and create that nice colour. Just going to tidy up down here with my dark. Flip off my dust. Gorgeous. All right, keep moving across the page. So on this side, I do have this limey green. I'm not sure, but anyway, we'll put that down. Again, I've got it on its side. And I'm just going to pull it down like this. And there's some creases and cracks in this paint as well, but I want to get this down first, and then we can look at that. Pushing it in. So it's gone a bit muddy because of the purples, but that's okay. You've got to have some shadow down there anyway. And then we've got a few areas where it's kind of cracked and you can see the wood showing through. So I'm going to do the wood in this brown, reddy brown colour. And I'll probably add some purple into that as well, just to make it darker. But you can see the paint's been cracking off. So if you use your brown, just mark in those sections where you can see the wood showing through with your brown. Okay, so up on the side here, next to the plate behind the doorknob, it's quite cracked in there, so I'm going to make that darker. I'll put the purple over it. So sometimes if you don't want to use black, you can make your own blacks that might be a bit warmer with your browns and purples and things like that. Okay, so that's looking a bit light. So if I bring my darkest purple over that now, and just darken up some of these spots over the browns, like that, get that lovely cracked impression happening. I feel like it's not green enough, but anyway. Down here through there and there. So that's a little bit darker. And tip off my dust again. I'm going to come back with my green now and just tidy up or brighten up some of it through here. So I'm just using it tilted on its side, but tilted so that I'm getting a wider mark, but not putting the whole piece down. That way I don't get hard lines, I get softer lines. It's a bit too bright, but anyway, I'm going to quieten that down now with my finger. Softly blending all of those together, the browns and the purples and that greeny colour. Pulling gently, gently to blur it off a bit. Tipping off my dust. But I feel like it needs to be slightly darker. But anyway, just put a bit of shadow down through there a little bit more. There we go. So now it's starting to look like it's got that lovely timber grain through it. Coolio. Now, before we get into the plate, which is kind of sitting on top of all the timber, I'm going to move over now to the right side and do some work in there. So then we can do the plate and then we can do the knob. So on this right side, we've got the same kind of green that's in there, which doesn't really look that green to me, but anyway. Lighten it up a tad. And you won't always have exactly the right colours, so just work with whatever you have. So over here on this side, we've got the green down here. So I'm just going to run that down through there, much like we did before. When you pull it, it starts to create a really nice texture. See how when I'm pulling that through with the pastel stick, it's getting that gritty, old effect, hopefully. And that's working out really well. So I'm going to keep doing that. Crossing to here. And then just pushing harder where I can see the green paint that hasn't come off. See how the texture of the paper really helps to give it that feeling of old. The green colour is bothering me. I'm going to see if I can find something a bit closer to it in my kit. And I'm sure that'll give you a minute to catch up. Okay, I think I've found something that might be a bit better. That's this green. There are so many greens in the world, and honestly, no matter how many green pastels I buy, I never, ever get the right colour. It's just such a massive range of colours, but I think that looks a bit better to me. So this is what happens, you see, and it's really easy just to go over things and change the colour or whatever with pastels. That's better. And then I can bring that same green over into here to give this a bit of a taste of that too, so that it kind of ties in together. Just going to run that down there like that over the other green, and I quite like what that's doing actually. It's nice. Sometimes you get a pleasant surprise when you mix your colours together. It's not always all bad. Okay, that's pretty good, I reckon. Throw a bit of it over here as well. Cool. Now I'm going to chip off my dust again. Very dusty today. Yeah. All right. So now we've got to, we might just do the across ones up here now. So I know I've got a fair bit of the brown in there already. I just want to get a little bit more texture happening through there. So if I just keep pulling that across, I'm just going to go into that purple section as well so that it looks like it all belongs together. And then I do the same thing again with that orangey coloured pastel. So just put a bit of that in kind of randomly, but run it across the page horizontally so that you're getting that nice shape of the grain of the wood. Through there. And there's a little bit of that up in here too. So I'm just put a bit of that there while I've got it in my hand. Okay, so that's that woody look on the side. Quite good. I might pop a little bit of it just down in here. I know it's not quite dark enough, but when I add the other brown over it, it'll start to make some sense. It's all looking quite old and messy, which is good. All right. Nice, nice. Now we've got to get that lovely dark line back in between these two panels and across some of these horizontal ones as well. And that shadow down in there. So I'm going to go back to my dark purple and mark in some of the darks, just the horizontal ones at this stage. And then I can run down with my vertical line and clean up all the ends. Okay, so there's not a lot, they're not all completely even, so don't do them evenly. And they don't all have the same shape either. So some are a bit wider, some are more narrow. So just running that through there softly, softly to get some of those lines in. We've also got a bit of green paint on some of these too, so we should put some of that in there. I'll get my new green that I picked up before and just pop some of that on there just to say, yep, this was painted that colour once. It's not anymore. A few little spots of green here and there. Lovely, lovely. All right. And then we can put some of the browns in on the right-hand side of this vertical beam where the paint's peeling off there as well. Down, down, down. A little bit on this side. So don't forget the other side. There's a few bits of timber showing through on those sides as well. Back down into here where we were before. So we've got some nice darks in there now, so we can add a little bit of brown. Still put more dark in a sec. Just down through there. Oh, looks like my video is frozen. Hopefully it'll catch up with me in a minute. Sorry about that. So, yeah, just putting some of the brown down in the side there, and then we'll put the dark line down between those two beams so that it all looks like it's joined together. And I'll do that now, even though the video is frozen. I might just pause recording and see if I can get it to kick off again. One moment. Okay, so it doesn't seem to want to become unfrozen, which is a shame. But I'll keep talking anyway, and hopefully it'll catch up with me. And we can carry on. If not, I might have to make 2 videos. There might be part 1 and part 2. Let's see how we go. So I will just talk us through this part. So what I'm doing is I'm putting some of the wood or the browns down in through these green areas on the right side of the panel. So this green strip that's running vertically. And I'm going to then touch it up with my darkest purple just to create a bit of shadow and tone through there. And I'll draw a line down there between the vertical beam and the horizontal beams with my dark purple. But I don't want to have it perfectly straight. So sort of lifting and pushing and varying the pressure slightly so that it makes a little bit of a varied line. Okay, and then down here, under that little section that's got an angle on it, there's a bit of shadow below that. So I'm just going to darken that off again with some shadow with my dark purple, my blacky purple colour. And then just, again, putting some of the darkest purple down through some of the creases or healing paint sections to give it a bit of contrast and a bit of depth. Okay, so just wandering around doing that. And then we'll be ready to get into the plate behind the doorknob. I'm just running my purple line down on the right side of the plate between it and the timber beam to create a little bit of a shadow. And then I'll just softly put my finger up on that so that it's not too definite. Softly, softly. Okay. Now we're going to get into the beam. I'll just tip off my dust again. So don't look at what I'm doing because the screen is frozen, but I'll talk us through it, which is probably the best way anyway. That means you can look at what you're doing and still hear me. Okay. So on the plate, it's that paler green colour, which we put down in the beginning, but obviously it's gotten all dirty and a bit marked again now. So I'm going to go over it with that light green again, because I want to get a bit more of that on there. And where the beveled edge is, kind of just maybe I'm going to leave that and let the purple be the edge. Now, if you haven't got enough purple there, you can always touch it up afterwards with a bit more of the purple, just to give it that shadow sort of side to the bevel. So just running my green around, and I'm trying not to blend it in with my fingers, because what I want it to do is pick up the grit of the paper and then look gritty on the picture, basically. Okay. You might have to overlap the edges of the doorknob a little bit, just so that you get that lovely continuation of the colour and texture below it. And that's okay. We can do that because we know where it is now, and we can draw it back in afterwards. So just running my green down here on the plate, this light green, and I'm just wiping it over, kind of more vertical direction, I suppose, but I'm trying to let the paper show through as the texture of the rusty old plate that's under there. Okay, so I've put that on now, and then I'm going to get my, well, actually, no, what I'm not, I'm going to kind of just gently now blend the darker side into those purples that are underneath it that we put down earlier. So we put those down so that we create this beautiful shadow on the left side of the plate. And then as it comes across, it gets lighter because it's catching the light, and there's not as much shadow on the right side. So just pushing that in slightly. When I'm blending, I'm just running my finger up and down in a vertical direction, very softly, and just pushing those colours in together. Very softly on the top, on the left top area, just pushing that in softly, softly. So we're still retaining some of the texture, but we're getting that dark colour that we put down underneath to sort of come through a little bit more and give us the shadows that we're looking for. I've just got to tip off more dust. Okay. Now, I'm going to use my brown, so that's that reddy brown colour, and I'm going to put it over the dark purple that I put down earlier on the left-hand side of the plate. So where it's got the shadow between there and the timber, where they join, we put the dark purple before to give it the shadow on the bevel edge. But I'm going to pop a bit of my brown over that now, just to redden it up a little bit, because it's all starting to look a bit purple, I think, anyway. Mine is. And I just want to get that a bit warmer. So putting the brown over the purple creates a really beautiful dark, and without having to go to black, hopefully. Okay, and then on the bottom side of the knobs, you can see under the knob on the plate is quite dark. There's a beautiful shadow under there. So I want to darken that off as well with some of the brown. And then I'm going to come over it with the green, not the bright green, but that mid green that I went and grabbed before, because that's going to give me a really nice shadow. The brown and the green together will make yummy mud and create a really lovely shadow underneath the knob. So that's the area under the knob, between the knob and the keyhole. And it's got this lovely shadow in there. And I'm also going to throw some of this darker green, not the mid green that I grabbed late, down the left-hand side over the purple a little bit. Again, just to create that muddy kind of colour. Cool. I'm just going to softly push that around, get it to stick to the paper. Sometimes you've got to push it in to make it stick. Softly, softly. And it makes the beautiful muddy colours, the browns and the greens. Nice. We want this to look sort of aged and old and, you know, rusty and whatever. There we go. And then I'm going to come back in with my dark purple again down the edge of that dark, dark edge on the left of the plate, just over the brown again. So it's starting to create a really nice dark colour without going to black. Black is awesome, but sometimes it's a little bit too flat and doesn't have enough warmth, which is why I like to try and find other ways of making the darks dark. So the purples over the browns are really yummy. And then I'm going to zhoosh a bit of the purple under the knob there where it's got the shadow. because the edge of the knob will be quite dark in the bottom there with the purple. Remember, we've got to make that really dark there. And so it sort of merges into the back a little bit. So you can't kind of see where that knob starts and stops because we've got that lovely dark area behind it. I'm just going to push that in a little bit. And then come back over it with my lighter green again, just to, it kind of, sometimes you can use the pastels themselves to blend the colours around. And it's quite nice because it leaves a slight colour over the top, but you also get to merge the colours together underneath using the pastels. It does make the pastel a bit grubby, but we can wipe those clean. And another great way to clean your pastels is with rice flour. So if you have some rice, you can mill it in a Thermomix or something to make flour, or just buy rice flour. Put it in a container, throw your pastels in there, or not throw them, place them gently, and then give it a really good little shake, gentle shake, and all the dust will come off your pastels and they'll be beautiful and clean and bright again. So I try to do that every time I finish a painting, and I've got all the pastels to put back into my collection that I've been using, because I keep my pastels separate when I'm painting something. I have my own little palette like we did today. But once I'm finished, I like to give them a good clean through with my rice flour, and then when I put them back, you can see what colours are what. So I've got a nice shadow happening there now. We've got to put our little screws in. So I'm going to use my brown to put the top left one in. I'm just going to draw a circle, small circle. This is when it gets fiddly because you're doing the small things. Okay, and is there another brown one? Not really. The others are sort of more green with an outline around them. So I'm just going to do the outline, do a circle, and then I can pop the green over the top. It's like they're rusty around the edges. While I've got this brown in my hand, I'm going to dab it a little bit of it around on the left-hand side of the plate, just running it softly. This is a really soft pastel, this one. It's a blue earth, and they're little squares, rectangles. And so because it's so soft, if I just rub it softly, gently over the top, it's picking up the texture of the paper. And so that way, I don't need to blend it in. I can just let it sit there and be the texture, which is nice. A few little dots here and there as well. Just some random sort of rusty marks that will give us the age of this thing, or at least tell us it's nice and old and worn and everything. It's annoying not having this screen. Every time I look up, nothing's changed. Okay. So just dabbing my brown around and putting it where you can see all those little rusty marks. Cool. Now, screws. So the top left one, I'm going to see if I can use a bit of charcoal just to put a little dark outline around it. You can see it's got a dark shadow sort of around it, and then there's a tiny shine on the top right side of this little screw, top left screw, and on the bottom side it's got a little dark shadow. So I'm just going to try and see if I can make that work. Sometimes you need charcoal just to get into the tiny parts that you can't quite fit a big chunky pastel in. And I'm going to put a little tiny shine just on the top of that screw with my pale blue or pale green, whatever you've got there. Just wants to have a tiny little shine there. And a dark cross, a mark across it so that it looks like that's the bit you put your screwdriver in. Then on the top right side, the screw on that side, it's the same color as the panel. So you can't really see. All it's doing is it's telling me where it is with shadows. I'm just going to use my charcoal, see if I can make that work. Put a little line across for the screwdriver. And then it's like a little half moon shadow shape underneath. That'll do for that one. Then down the bottom, we've got, again, a bit of a dark shadow around the outline, right? Outside edges. I'm going to use my charcoal to put a little shadow around there. And then the tops of them are the lighter green color, so I can grab that and just softly put a bit of that over the top so that they look like they belong there. They've got a little bit of brown and a little bit of shadow around the outside of them. Like that. Okay. And then we've got the bevel. So which green is that? It's the light one. So just along the bottom of the panel, I'm going to put a bit of the lightest green just to indicate the edge of the bevel there. So the top of the panel, not the bevel, is a bit lighter. And it just gives me that little bit of information to highlight the panel a bit more on the right side and also indicate where the bevel mark is. So I'm doing that across the bottom and just lightening that up a little bit so that the bevel is a little bit darker. I'm pulling this brighter green up again on the right side, again, just to accentuate the bevel. You can't really see it on that right-hand side. It's not too obvious because it sort of blends in a little bit, but there's a very subtle shadow of it, more at the top than the bottom. I'm going to try and draw that in with a bit of charcoal. Just sort of might use a ruler. I don't know where I've put it now. Oh, there it is. Use a ruler down here with a bit of charcoal just to get a hint of bevel. Darkening up. I've gone a bit too wide on the side here on the right hand side. I thought I'd darken up the edge of the panel where it meets the timber, and I went a bit too wide, so now I've got to fix the whole thing. That's okay. It's a beautiful thing about pastels is you absolutely can. You know, you make a mistake, it's really easy to fix. Just means you've got to go over things again and again and again sometimes, which gets monotonous, but it's worth it to get it right. Cool. Okay. And then we've got our little bevel down the side there. Take that bit of charcoal off. So you can see the bevel is just very subtle on that right side. So I've just used a tiny bit of charcoal to draw a line down there. But otherwise, you can't really see it. Okay, I'm going to tip off my dust again. Then we'll do the doorknob. Right. So again, you'll just have to listen while I do this because I can't get the video to come back. So I've got my red-brown colour, which is the original colour we had for the doorknob, and I'm just going to draw this back in because I've lost all the edges as I was doing the panel behind it. So what you want to do is try and get a nice sharp edge. And to do that, just use the end of your stick, your pastel stick, or the side, or the part that's got the sharpest edge on it, and draw in the beautiful round shape again. And if you need to add more pastel and fill it up a bit more, then do that. And I'm just going to push it in. And remember, when you push it in, to push it in a round direction. So do it round in the shape of the knob. Now you should have some dark underneath the knob, because we put that in before onto the panel, especially on the left side more so, because that's where the shadow sits. But we've also got to put some shadow on the knob itself. So on the right hand side, we've got a very dark area. So just run your dark purple or blue violet, or whatever you're using, even if it's dark blue would be working quite well, around there. And notice the area of dark on the doorknob. So it's almost a half moon. It comes all the way around from the right hand side underneath where it's very dark, and then up onto the left side, and then it has a little ridge where you can see it's kind of got a panel, a little lip there on the edge of the doorknob on the right hand side. You can see where the light's catching it. So pop your dark purple on there and then just gently blend that in. So you're keeping that area really dark and strong. Okay, so that's nice. We'll push all that in. My dark purple's very crumbly, so I've got to keep keeping off all the dust when I use it. It's very, very crummy. There we go. Once you've pushed in the dark and you've got that working nicely, then we want to add a little bit of light. So pick up that lighter brown that we had before. So it's that terracotta kind of color, and just rub it lightly over, do little squiggly sort of marks as you rub it around where you can see the lighter brown area on the doorknob. Okay, so there's a lighter brown area top left. As it goes around the edge of the doorknob into the dark, there's a top left area there that's a little bit lighter. And then the left side of the doorknob on the top of it, or the main part of it, has got a lot of that brown, this lighter brown as well. So just zhoosh some of that around. We don't want to blend it in because we'll lose the texture. And there's also a little bit, see the rim on the far right of the doorknob? There's a little rim there, and you can just see it lit up on the lighter brown section on the right, and then it comes up towards the top. And as it gets to the top, it gets lighter and sort of all becomes the same lighter brown through that area there. So that's at about 1 o'clock, if you're looking at a clock, between 1 and 2. That's that lighter brown section through there. So pop a bit of that in there to get the feeling or the texture or the shape of this doorknob. Once you've done that, I'm going to put some light on. So you can see there's light shining on it, and it's quite speckly because it's obviously a bumpy texture. So I'm going to use my blue. The blue I picked, or the grey blue colour. I'm not going to go straight to white just yet. I'm going to try it with this, and if it's not light enough, then I can look at other options. But sometimes a blue or a grey is a really good option because it sort of casts a bit of a shadow anyway. So if you do have to put lighter over it, it'll still be really effective. So I'm using my grey blue colour, and I'm just dotting it on. Not the tip, I don't want all separate dots, just use the side of it, but kind of dab it on so that you're getting that grainy kind of feeling. Don't rub it too much, just dab it and then press and push, lift off. And hopefully, I don't think it's light enough, but it's a good base to put under my light that's coming. Okay, so that looks all right. And now I can I might try my pale green. See, I'm so reluctant to go straight to white. This is my lightest green. It's very soft. I just want to see what that does. It's much lighter than what the blue or grey was. It's looking pretty nice. So maybe that'll be enough, but if not, I can always go to white. Maybe. I'll just have to reassess that. And that little rim around the edge on the top right there, it's got a little shine. So I'm just using the end of my pastel to dab a couple of spots there, just to lighten that up. I'm also going to put it over on that little timber ridge on the right-hand side. It's got that little angle and it's lighter than the rest. I'll put a bit of that green over that as well, just to give it some light. There we go. I went outside the line, so now I'm going to come back with my dove and fix it up a little bit. There we go. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to go to white. So, and that's the beauty of, you know, trialing things until you get to the very rightest bit. And so now I can just dot a few little dots of white using that very edge of my white pastel. And I'm literally making tiny little dots with it in amongst these other light colours that I've popped on. So that's going to give it a really nice shine. So now we're going to do our keyhole. So I'm going to actually go over that area with my green again, because I want the edge of the keyhole to be quite sharp. At this stage, it's going to be a big blurry mess if I leave it like that. So I'm going to put more green kind of around it, so then I can get a harder, sharper shape. And I might try using charcoal to do that. Or if you have a black pencil, do I? Got a nearly black one, might try that. So pastel pencils are really handy for doing the shapes like this that need to be quite sharp and they're small. It's not black enough, but it'll give me the right shape. So I can draw this in with a pencil, which is nice. Depending on what pencils you have and what pastels you use, sometimes pencils won't work really well if you filled the paper up too much. You just got to be aware of that. But it's working quite well for this, which is awesome. Coming down on there, just getting the shape of that right. And that's our keyhole. Done with looks like a grey pencil to me. Probably needs to be a bit blacker. But now I've got the shape of it in, I can just come back over that with a little bit of my deep purple. Put some of it in there without blurring the edges, hopefully. And tipping off my dust. I think that's just about done. Just darken off in there a little bit more. We want that keyhole to be nice and dark. If you haven't got black pencil, then use it. The other awesome black thing you can use is charcoal pencils, because they're a little bit darker, well, much darker than your willow. You'll get a really nice, hard, dark line with charcoal pencils, and I find they work really well too with pastels. Get the extra soft pencils, they're much easier to play with. So when you're doing things like I was doing barbed wire on a painting a few weeks ago, and the pastel was just too chunky. I couldn't get a fine enough line, so I used the soft charcoal, and it was really good. It worked really well. It's a bit blacker than the willow. So there's always that option to have in your toolkit. Okay, so I think we're just about done. I'm going to stand up and look at this from a distance, because normally I can see it on the screen and it gives me a better view, but I can't do that at the moment. Yeah, I think that's pretty much finished. So I will send you a photo or include a photo of my artwork with the notes and the reference picture so you can see that. And as I said, I'm sorry about the video not working, but at least you've got the audio. And I know sometimes it's easier not to have to look up anyway. You can actually just, you know, carry on and listen as you go. So at least we've got that, which is better than nothing. And again, my apologies for all of that. But that's technology and there's not much I can do about it, sadly. So I hope you enjoy doing this class. I really enjoyed it. I love doing textures. I could probably sit here and carry on for a bit longer and just work a bit more on the textures of those because there's so much in there. It's quite wonderful. So enjoy. Send me your photos when you're done. So I really do love to see how you went. And then I can pop them in the newsletter and share them with everyone. People love to see what we do in class. It's inspiring and exciting, and I think it's really nice for all of us to see what each other has done. And it's a nice feeling when you see your painting out there in the world. So don't be shy. Send it to me, and none of them have names on them unless you want to sign them. If you don't sign them, there's no names. So, you know, you don't even have to own up to it if you don't want to. Don't see why you wouldn't though, because everyone does such beautiful work. So as I said, thank you very much for joining me today. And to those people who were going to come to class on Thursday, I've had to pre-record this class because I've got family things to do. So sorry I couldn't make it this week, but I'll definitely see you next week. And for you who has bought the video or downloaded it, as I said, send me your picture and I look forward to seeing it. Thanks for coming. Bye for now.